Hi, welcome to Grandma Lillian's Kitchen. Today I'm going to be making cocoa butter squares. When I read the recipe, it sounds a little like brownies, but there's a lot of stuff going on here, so I'm not really sure what it's going to come out like. It's probably going to be rich like brownies are and thick, but we'll find out soon. So it calls for a half a cup of shortening, a cup of sugar, 2 eggs, 4 tablespoons of cocoa mixed in with a half a cup of boiling water, a cup and a half of pastry flour sifted, a half a teaspoon of baking soda, half a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon and a half of baking powder, a third of a cup of buttermilk, a quarter cup of either apple butter or peach butter, and I'm going to use apple butter, and half a cup of walnuts and a teaspoon of vanilla. There's the vanilla. I'm not going to use walnuts because I'm actually making these for my partner in crime, and he prefers to not have nuts in his baked goods, which I think is nuts, pun intended. I'm not a huge fan of chocolate. Some of my childhood friends can probably tell you that I was the one that had Halloween candy left over at Easter and Easter candy left over at Halloween, and so they were probably my best friends because of that, because I didn't eat the chocolate. And yet my mom was a total chocoholic, so I don't know what happened. Anyway, so I'm going to be making these for him, so I'm going to leave the nuts out. It calls for pastry flour, and I don't have pastry flour, and I found a substitution recipe where you can use equal parts of pastry, all-purpose flour and cake flour. I don't have cake flour either. So I also found another substitution where you can use 2 tablespoons of cornstarch for every cup of all-purpose flour. And I think what the purpose of it is just to cut down on the gluten, or the amount of gluten for the amount of flour that you're using. So I'm using a cup and a half of all-purpose flour, so I'm using 3 tablespoons of cornstarch. I will put all of the substitutions in the description, so you don't have to worry about that if you don't have pastry flour either. All right, so I'm going to get started. It says to cream together the shortening and the sugar. So let's get going with that. All right, and I'm just going to dump the whole cup of sugar in there. Oh. That's not what I wanted to do either. All right. And I did have to soften the shortening a little, but I didn't melt it. It's just softened to make it easier to cream the sugar in with it. You know, it's funny, I really do not remember my grandma baking at all. And I wonder, so many of her recipes are for baked goods, it makes me wonder if she did bake a lot for her family, her kids and her husband, grandpa, and of course my dad and all my aunts and uncles. Because I don't really ever remember having anything that grandma baked. Again, she died when I was around 16, and we only went to see them once a year, at Thanksgiving usually. Maybe there were baked goods and I just don't remember, but I really don't remember any baked goods. I remember weird things though, like I remember her kitchen table and the chairs and her stove. So I can tell you all about those, but I can't tell you half of what, whether she baked anything for me or not. I just don't know. All right, so that's creamed pretty well. Now I'm just gonna add in the eggs. It says beat in the eggs. So let's just get those mixed up. And then mixed in. And I just realized I don't have another spoon or anything over here. So I will be right back, because I'm going to need that to mix the cocoa together. All right, hang on. I'll be right back. Okay, so then it says take a half a cup of boiling water and mix it in with your, 4 tablespoons of cocoa powder. And this was boiling not very long ago, so it is still hot. Oops, I should have used a bigger bowl. All right, let me get that mixed in a little bit. I'm pretty sure it says boiling water just to help dissolve the cocoa powder. All right, because you really don't want to dump boiling water into eggs. You'd really want to temper the eggs first. And since this is just hot and not boiling, I'm just going to go ahead and do it. I think it'll be all right. Okay. So, 4 tablespoons of cocoa powder and a half a cup of hot water. Get that mixed up a little more. Oop. There's still some undissolved powder. I'm just going to scrape it out with a spatula and get it on in there. All right. Get that mixed in, and then it says sift the flour, baking soda, salt, and baking powder, and add alternately with the sour milk, which of course is buttermilk. And yes, I am using the buttermilk powder, which is right here. So, I think that's looking all right, mixed together. So I'm going to put in, I don't really, all right, get some of the flour in there. And yep, I see some's going over the edge and not getting sifted, but you know what, that'll be all right. So I'm just going to add the cornstarch and the baking powder, baking soda, and salt to the flour mess. I'm going to go ahead and put that in there. Oh. All right. So let me add some of this, sift it on in, alternately with the buttermilk, which needs to be stirred. So we're going to use the chocolate spoon, which is all right. Add about half of that. It's all going to the same place anyway, so I don't see what it matters. Yeah, and I got a lot of substitutions going on here. Because we're substituting the buttermilk powder for buttermilk, and we're substituting cornstarch and AP flour for pastry flour. Oops. I figure the pastry flour, though, is just kind of, again, not as glutinous. And so it's probably going to not make it as dense. All right, let's add some more flour. I'll just go ahead and get the rest of it in there. All right, and the rest of the buttermilk. And then when that gets all mixed, add the apple butter and the vanilla. And again, you could use peach butter too. I think it'll add a nice, I'm using apple butter, but I think it'll give it a nice flavor to complement the chocolate or the cocoa. So complement the cocoa. And also add some moisture. It doesn't really seem to be dry. That's why I think it's going to be kind of like brownies. All right. In goes the vanilla and the 1/4 cup of apple butter. If I would have known I had exactly a 1/4 cup of apple butter left in the jar, I would have just left it in the jar instead of doing this twice. But there we go. A little uncooperative. All right, we'll go with that. Now I'll get that all mixed in. And it says to, now if I were adding the walnuts, now is when I'd put them in. But pour into a baking pan lined with wax paper and bake in a moderate oven, and then cut in squares. So, bake in a moderate oven. I'm going to take that to mean 350. It does not say for how long. I'm going to give it probably 20 minutes before I check it. And then we'll just go do the toothpick test from there. But it looks like a brownie batter, a cake batter. And I don't have wax paper. Well, I do have wax paper, but I don't do a lot with wax paper. So I'm going to go ahead and use parchment paper in my baking pan. And we'll get this out of here and into the baking pan. All right. And I'm also thinking, because we're lining the baking pan with paper, this is going to be gooey. So again, brownie consistency. But I think it's funny that they call it cocoa butter squares because there's no butter in there. They're shortening. So, it should just be cocoa squares. Oh, come on. All right, almost. Almost. Oh, there we go. Okay, good enough. All right, now we have what probably is going to be very brownie-esque. I'm going to go ahead and put it in a 350-degree oven for about 20 minutes and check it then, see what we're like, and we'll go from there. I'll see you soon. All right, guys, I'm back. So it is a brownie, very, very similar to a brownie. I actually baked it at 350 for 45 minutes. When I checked at 20 minutes, it was still very watery in the center. You can kind of see the outline of the middle. And then again, at 30 minutes, it was still kind of wiggly. 45 minutes did it. So let's unveil this brownie and see what we've got here. It is chocolatey, obviously. I mean, it is chocolate, so just go ahead and cut into it. It's more cakey. It's not doughy or gooey. You know, brownies are usually kind of dense. So it's very cakey. So it looks, yep, looks just like cake. It's not dense like a brownie. I guess making the, ooh, it's very light. It's crumbly. I think it would be really good with the walnuts in it. It's kind of like a, oh, yeah, it's very, very crumbly. It's falling apart on me. It's spongy and light. It's really interesting. That was attractive. I don't really taste the apple butter, but it's not a heavy chocolate either. It's kind of, it's like a light, it's like a cocoa. I guess that's why they're cocoa butter squares. But yeah, it's like a light chocolate. It's not a heavy chocolate. It's very moist. It's not bad. Mind you, this is coming from somebody that doesn't really care for chocolate. It's really not bad. I'm kind of at a loss for how to describe it. I like the crusty texture of the edges, so I would definitely be like an edge person if I were to eat this. But it is really good. I might have to make it again and try it with peach butter to see if that changes the flavor any. But there are the cocoa butter squares. So, from a person that doesn't care for chocolate, it's really not bad. Give it a try. Hope you like it. See you next time. Thanks.